Today on the show, I am so excited to be joined by former Special Forces soldier and the current star of Channel 4's hit show SAS, Who Dares Wins. It's Ollie Ollerton on the show. Ollie is a man who has been through so much in his career and his life, including crazy stories like having to flee over the border in Thailand, having been wanted by the government after saving over 20 children from a paedophile ring. He's here to talk about those stories and many more, such as being attacked by a circus chimp at the age of 10 and almost losing his life in the process. You're going to hear all these crazy stories and everything it takes mentally to be a Special Forces soldier. This was a very, very no-holds-barred conversation with Ollie, and he opened up about absolutely everything, including mental health issues and some very strong opinions on mindset and mentality. I honestly believe you are going to gain so much from listening to this conversation. And if you enjoy the conversation, then please leave a rating and a review on iTunes. It helps us out so much with the visibility of the show. Now, without any further ado, Ollie Ollerton, welcome to the Freedom Pact.
Thank you.
I'd love to start off by discussing this idea with conformity. A quote of yours that really stood out to me was, "If you want to fulfill your potential, don't conform." What is it that you actually mean by this?
What I mean by that is, we are brought into this world as created beings. We then, you go to school, and then all that all that kind of creativity is sucked out of you. You're being systemized with the system and put into a process to support the system. And I just think that, the sort of carved, pre-described path is not productive to the individual. So for me, I think one of the things that I've always done, subconsciously and unconsciously, is I've always questioned status quo. I've always questioned, if everyone's sort of told to go left, I'll see what opportunities lay to the right. So I've always questioned the system. I've always asked, why? Does that suit me? Does that suit my purpose? What is that? And I feel that so many people are they're just so conformist. They're keeping up with the Joneses. They do what is prescribed. They don't think, why am I doing this? It's ridiculous. I mean, to give you an example, some friends recently, we want to take our child and we want to get them christened. And I was like, well, why are you doing that? Because they don't go to church. They're not religious. And they basically wanted, because, well, we don't know really. They didn't have the answer to the question. But the thing is that it was what everyone else in the family had done previous to them. So many people are following this path without any real purpose or personal direction of why they're doing it. And I have always, and like I say, subconsciously and consciously questioned that, the purpose in everything I'm doing. I've always asked the question why. People, even the Special Forces, I didn't even know I was doing it, but everyone used to say, I can always remember you. Everything we did, you used to ask why. But why shouldn't we ask why? Why shouldn't we understand the purpose of why we're doing something, what it means to us individually, and how is that going to benefit us and help us personally to grow? But so many people are just living on the prescribed route, and they're not doing something that fulfills them and anything that they're passionate about.
Yeah, that brings me on to something you mentioned before that I loved. It's this idea of people living life through an LPS, I think you call it, a life positioning system.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. People are on their LPS. Everyone's on the LPS near enough. And that's the life positioning system. It's exactly the same as a GPS. You get in a car and the car tells you exactly where to go. And even when you reach your destination, you think, holy shit, I know a much better route than that, but I wasn't prepared to think. But people in their lives are following the life positioning system. They're following, they're told where to go, what to do. They're not following, we're born as creative beings, right? We're meant to be out there. We're meant to create. We're meant to create our own purpose. And people just aren't doing that. And we as humans, we're not meant to be put into boxes and then put into a certain sort of demographic of our, our working life or our jobs and everything else. It's like me. I thought joining the military was my purpose, my meaning, my everything. But I realized through that whole career that it wasn't. I got there and realized that every stage I went through in the military, it just didn't satisfy me. I wasn't at ease with what I was doing. I was at dis-ease with everything I was doing in the military. It wasn't, and everything I was searching for, this external fix, it just wasn't there. But it takes a lot of people will just sit there and endure that. It's like having toothache and never actually having the extraction because you don't want that short-term discomfort. You know what I mean? It's like you will endure that ongoing toothache for all your life because you're scared to step out of that and have the extraction, which will cause a great deal of pain. However, it will have a long-term benefit. And that's really the ethos behind Breakpoint.
It makes me wonder, when did you first start to question, the idea of conformity and LPS? What were you like as a student in school? Did you realize this from a young age? Were you quite rebellious in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I started off in school and I was, just the grade A student, as a kid. This was sort of I don't even know what you call it in school terms. I wasn't even interested, but, before the age of 12, I was doing everything. I was conforming. I enjoyed my sort of schooling and everything else. But, I got to a point, I think there was a quite remarkable point where I was about 13, 14. I just questioned everything. I lost interest at school. Not everyone is geared to be able to absorb academia. It's just not, people that think, people are not victimized, but people are given sort of a negative spin because they're not very good at school. But the thing is, some people aren't good at tests. Some people aren't good at following a syllabus. It's just not the perfect fit for everyone. It doesn't mean that they're dumb. But for me, I think to be honest, I was always, that rebellious side of me was always there. It started at an early age. And I really think a lot of it was the spin-off from when I got attacked by the chimp. That changed me. And these changes, monumental changes like that, you don't sort of sit there and go, oh, I've now changed as a person. It's only in hindsight, in reflection, that you understand that. And for me, looking back now to that, my life changed drastically from that point. Seeing sort of life, the fact I was going to lose my life at such an early age, it gave me a sort of a different spin on life. And that for me was the start of sort of the rebellion, I think. And that was at 10 years old.
Yeah, you bring that up, and that's something I wanted to get to, because I imagine that is a great example of a breakpoint in your life, because I imagine, you had to find some sort of clarity in an unimaginable chaotic state, but you were able to find that clarity in that moment during that incident. But I know you must get asked that question a lot. So, but I would like our listeners to just understand it, because I think it's a great story, and I think it's important that sort of clarity and that breakpoint in that moment, that was pivotal to your survival.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that was, as you said, that was my first breakpoint. And that was the moment that, I was unfortunately attacked by a chimp at the circus, at the local circus. Just as they were setting up the circus, we turned up and asked if we could have a look around. And then I got attacked by a chimp. And I'm sat under the chimp. And this thing's attacking me. It's trying to defend its young. And it's tearing chunks out of me. And I knew at that point, I was sat there under the chimp. And I thought, if I don't do something, I'm going to die. And it was that moment that I had to do something to change that situation. But by doing so, it was going to anger that chimp even further. I was retaliating. So obviously it's going to up the ante and do the same with me. But I had no choice. So I took that decision, made that happen, and managed to dislodge the chimp. I managed to get my foot up to my chest and kick the chimp off. And in doing so, I managed to create enough space for me to get away from it. And then the chimp was caught by the chain. But I reflect on that moment now, and there's so many people in life that will stay under the chimp. You know what I mean? Throughout life, they will stay under that chin and allow the discomfort to go on and on. It goes back to the toothache analogy. But you have, and this is the whole concept of breakpoint, you have to take the short-term discomfort for the long-term gain. And we are such creatures of habit that even if it's a discomfort and a negative in our life, we will continue doing everything we did yesterday and the day before, because as far as survival is concerned, all we know is that kept us alive till today. So we are living in a repeat cycle of yesterday, which is actually a contradiction. And that causes, I feel, a lot of issues in people's personal lives, because we're meant to create, we're meant to be productive. However, the survival blueprint has primary control over everything that we do. But people, unless you understand that, you actually think you've got a real mental health issue.
I love how you've turned that experience into an analogy in a way of people staying under the chimp. And obviously it is such a traumatic experience, and one that you mentioned you carried for 30 years post. So when you look back on that now, is there anything that you managed to, other than that, take from the experience, maybe a lesson, something about yourself, a mentality? Was there any silver lining to that moment in your life now?
Yeah, no, 100%. You know, even at an early age, sat under the chin, regardless of your situation, you have choices. Regardless of where you are, what you're doing, what situation you're in, you have a choice. And that made me realize that no matter how harsh the situation, and it's happened to me a number of times, and I've got into, you know, sort of some very dark moments, but I've always realized, reflecting back on that moment, you still have a choice. You have a choice to think differently, to act differently. And that's the positive spin on that experience as a kid. And weird as it sounds, I'm so glad it happened. Because it caused me, you know, it's such an amazing story, and it taught me such an amazing lesson in life that has reflected in everything I've done. Again, like I say, you know, at the time, this is only in reflection. You can only sort of analyze in reflection as opposed to at the moment. But you know, that taught me so much. And weird as it sounds, like I say, not in the moment, but looking back, I'm glad it happened.
You mentioned that a breakpoint, by definition in computing, is an intentional stopping or pause in place in a program put in for debugging purposes. And you relate this to the special forces, but you also suggest that they are in each and every one of us. So where are they found in everyday life, and what are they by definition to you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that is, you know, I stumbled across that. I was just sort of looking at breakpoint, and I was putting that into the internet, into a Google search, actually, and it came up in Wikipedia. And it came up with that, you know, that sort of in computing terms. But the thing is, a lot of people can actually relate more to computing terms than we can into our own sort of human psychology. So, but it spells out exactly how breakpoint really works and how the special forces use that. And this also links in to a breathing technique. Now, basically, I mean, that is the whole concept behind it. You know, when you look at it, if you want to look at it from sort of a more biological view and not think it's just hocus pocus, the fact is, what happens when you get into a stressful situation is your cortisol levels fill up. Okay, your cortisol levels are raised, and that's what causes the confusion. We can actually only handle 5 to 9. Some people a lot less, but we can actually handle probably 5 to 9 pieces of information at any one time before we start getting confused, before we start looking for the easy way out. So basically what happens is, stressful situation, cortisol levels start to rise, we start to get confused, we start to make rash decisions that are not always the right ones, or we freeze in the situation. Now, a simple technique that they're starting to teach this in special forces all over the world. I'm not sure about the UK. I think it would take them some time to do this, but it comes by natural ease with the situation you're in anyway. But simply making sure your breathing is controlled will lower that cortisol. It allows that 5 to 9 become, and then what you do is you allow that 5 to 9 to become 1 to 2. So you look at the situation, you manage to triage the importance of everything that's going on, strip away all the crap that's going on inside your head, and deal with one or two things that are really important to get out of the situation. Now, you imagine special forces, they're stacking up on a door, about to go in a room that is full of possible enemy. You don't know what's behind the door. There could be nothing. You don't know. You could be walking into a wall of bullets. But the stress on the outside of that door is phenomenal. And unless you have what basically happens, unless you can control that sort of anxiety through breathing, your breathing becomes erratic, cortisol levels fill up, and before you know it, you're making really bad decisions. That really fits into that whole, and that for me is fits. When I saw that on Wikipedia, I just thought, wow, that is exactly what Breakpoint's all about. I didn't copy it from Wikipedia. It was already there. So yeah, it was just amazing when I saw that. But that is exactly what happens. We debug all the stuff, all the crap that doesn't matter, and deal with the real things, the one or two things that matter at that moment in time. Recalibrate, and then we deliver the correct action from a mindset of clarity. One thing I'd like to say is I do not own the concept or theory behind Breakpoint. Breakpoint is in every single one of us. Okay, our life, our days, our minutes, our hours are controlled by breakpoints. And breakpoint is the moment that you will decide that nothing will stand in the way of you and your goals. Now, that could be the fact that, you get there at night and you're thinking, oh, I've just cooked dinner, I'm really tired, I can't be bothered to do the washing, I'm going to leave it for tomorrow. This is how simple it is. But the thing is, by going through, pushing through, that's a breakpoint. No, I'm going to do it. I'm going to face the discomfort now, because tomorrow means I don't have to deal with it. And we're making decisions like that every day of our lives. It's like going for a run. I'm the same. I go for a run, and your mind is so devious at managing you. Go and check your phone, go and do this before you go for a run, to try and distract you from what you really need to do, not want to do, but sort of need to do, because your end goal is to get fitter. So for me, it's like that is a break point for me. I'm like, I know my mind is going to start reacting when it's a bit probably raining outside, whether, I'm tired, I've not trained, but I just know that putting on my shoes, putting a step outside that door is the only thing I need to do to make it work. And that is why, break points are everywhere we look. We as humans, right, there's three things: sex, food, and the shortcut to both of them. Not mentioning adding alcohol, because that turbo drives everything. But but that's it. It's like the shark analogy. A shark doesn't care about anything about sex, food, or food and sex. And we are always looking for the shortcut. We as humans it's the same for us. We're always looking for the shortest way to everything. So we will, that could be down to not sending the last email because you want to walk out the office, not doing, not dotting the I's and crossing the T's. So we're always looking for the shortcut in everything we do. And that's why I call that the shortcut syndrome. It's like, once you realize these emotions, and I talk about this a lot, you have to be an emotional observer as opposed to a victim. And if you don't observe the emotions and you become wrapped up in your emotions, you become the victim of them. So once you can stand aside and observe the emotions that are going on and happening inside your brain, and understand, right, this is ego, this is fear, this is whatever it is, once you can do it from that angle and start to understand which ones I want to accept and which ones I don't, you become the controller, opposed to you being controlled by your emotions.
Yeah, that reminds me of something you talked about in your book, and you stressed the importance of stepping out of your comfort zone, and that too many people are just, they're too content with living comfortably. So what I wanted to ask was why is this idea of getting out of your comfort zone so important to you, and is this something that you continue to do now, even after all your success in your career?
Well, first of all, I do. The simple answer to what you say is yes. I do constantly. A lot of people talk about, there's always obstacles in the path. The obstacles are the path. You know what I mean? Everyone's looking for the easy way out. But I feel that what we're talking about here is that I do, but it's linked to a goal. Now, if my goal is to say something like, I want to, not for instance, this isn't my goal, but I want to run a 20K race in 6 months' time, then as long as that working through that obstacle is because I want to reach that goal, then I must I must go through that process. And if it's not linked to a goal, it seems purposeless. We have to have purpose in everything that we do. Otherwise, there's no purpose in doing it, and we take the easy way out and live in this misconception of comfort zone. There's no comfort in comfort zones. There's no growth in comfort zones. There's nothing there. There's more so discomfort. But, I think that, if you've got a goal, it has to be linked to, we have to have a certain goal, a certain purpose. We as humans are put on this planet from a pure evolution basis to evolve, to create, to produce. And if we're not doing that, that's when we sort of spiral out of control and start going into depression. But I think that, I do that every day. I do that. Look, my goal is to build my business. My goal is to do X, Y, Z. I have so many goals. And every time I do something, if, something stands in the way of my goal, and that's the obstacle, then I know I've just got to go through it. But you have to then become process driven, because if you rely on emotion, your emotions will tell you to shut up, go and check your phone, go and turn the kettle on, go and get a packet of biscuits out of the fridge, go and do this. I think, I'll just do it all later. Later. No one's there to hand you back that time. So, I face obstacles every day.
Yeah, I love that idea of being goal driven and process driven. And one of the earliest examples I can think of that is a few years ago. I'm terrible at running. It's like the one thing I can't do. I go to the gym, but I'll lift weights or I'll swim or anything other than actual running. And I thought to myself, well, what's the best way to get running is, I'd never run a 5K at this point, but I decided I just signed myself up for the Cardiff Half Marathon. Yeah. And when that was in place, I had no choice but to go through that process then, because there was a goal at the end of it.
And you make yourself accountable.
One of the things you mentioned there was being purpose driven. And I wonder, because I imagine anyone who has lived, any sort of military career, a lot of their identity, a lot of their purpose is sort of consumed by their military career. That's who they are. And so when you eventually came out of that space, did you have any initial struggles in finding out who you are, what your purpose is, and how did you then go about figuring out what that is?
Yeah, it's a great question, but my purpose was the wrong purpose when I came out, because I was in, I joined the military. I thought it was, that was the world for me. That was everything I desired as a young man. That was it. That completed everything. But then when our perception and reality are obviously two very different things. And my reality, when I actually got in there, it didn't fulfill that purpose. And that purpose isn't something you can find by, oh, well, I'm in now and that ticks the box. It's something from deep within inside you that makes you feel, I am where I need to be. And that feeling was never there for me. When I left, my purpose was to get rich. Now, when I look back on that now, that is just ridiculous. Whatever dream or goal you have, there has to be an element of emotion. If I said to you, right, I want to be a millionaire, I want to imagine £1 million in the bank, and you look at that £1 million, that is absolutely nothing compared to what you could do with that money. So you have to link the emotion to the experience that money is going to create, not the fact of you having the money. Do you know what I mean? And it's like my business and everything now. My business is about the business. It's about what it does, what it delivers. It's about what I can give to other people, and that creates revenue for me. The revenue is the byproduct. The focus is what my company does, which, if I give you my mission statement is to create a globally identified brand recognized for the positive growth and development of others. And that is my focus. Now, obviously, everything that we do it creates revenue for us, but it creates revenue on the byproduct of being passionate about what I want to do for other people and how that helps me. And when I came out with it. I want to, it was too money focused. Everything was money focused, and it didn't create the level of emotion that's required for you to sort of feel passionate about what you're doing. So it took me a long, long time. 10 years. I was bouncing all over the world, going to war zones, going here, there, and everywhere, risking my life, doing stupid things, not being fulfilled, massive void in my life. So I was drinking alcohol. it was just such a messy way of living. And it wasn't until I started realizing that happiness, fulfillment, everything is not external, it's internal, it's within. And once you get that right, then everything else starts working around you.
Yeah, and I heard somewhere that you were quoted as saying that your purpose now is helping other people, and I
Yeah,
think that is spot on given what you went on to do afterwards with the work you did with rescuing children.
yeah.
And what was that experience like, and how much more did that give you than say money in your bank account?
Yeah, well, that was nothing. I had no idea what that was going to give me in return. I did it because obviously I was quite passionate. I heard the story about kids, 1.6 million kids a year. It's probably a lot more than that. That's just stats. Being sold into slavery and prostitution in Southeast Asia. So, immediately I wanted to be a part of that, to help and do what I could. And I got a chance to. Initially, I was training people to go undercover and try and find these kids that were being sort of exploited. And then there's a few sort of personal changes in my life, which meant I could go over and actually get involved in the operation. And we went into Thailand. We did a few things. We actually went initially to record a documentary on it, but it kind of went sour because everything's so corrupt over in Thailand that as soon as we got to the places where we suspected kids were, the whole staff had changed overnight. No problem here. So basically, we then went into the foothills of Thailand, between Thailand and the Burmese border, where there was satellite camps all across the border where they were holding kids being sold into slavery and prostitution. And we managed to get 22 kids out, which doesn't sound a lot. It doesn't sound a lot, but when it comes to child rescue, that is a lot of kids in one hit. Now, we made the mistake of advertising that to the world, which became the downfall of the charity, because the Thais came on a backlash, and basically was arrested on sight. We had to escape out of Thailand and get back to safety as soon as possible. But actually going through that process and seeing those kids and understanding that, we got the kids and we used to put them through into orphanages that would, the charity would then raise money for them to have a proper education. The amount of fulfillment I got from that was nothing I'd ever had before. I was so humbled by the experience. And when you look at it, and again, I keep always going back to evolution of the species. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it, that in helping others, we're going to get a lot of fulfillment back from that because it helps the species to survive and evolve. So it's no strange fact that, helping other people is such an amazing feeling and so fulfilling. And it's something that society creates these silos of people all fighting to get the top position, the most likes on Instagram, the best business, the best this, the best that, and very much wrapped in their own world, and they become very selfish. So sort of society is making people sort of steer away from this sort of humanized bond we have with everyone else, but to help other people. Once you do that, once you put your hand out for someone else that is in a lower position than you and pull them up, there is no other feeling like it. No other feeling like it. So that for me was an epiphany. It was a turning point, and it made me realize the power of helping other people. And that links back to my mission statement.
To get that across, I think that's an absolute beautiful answer.
Yeah.
So moving back to that identity thing, I think a lot of mental health issues can be related to that, and I assume a lot of military people go through the same thing. And when I was looking up your thoughts on mental health, one of the things I came across more than once was you talk about this negative cycle we go through surrounding mental health. Can you just explain what that is, and then in turn, how does someone go around breaking that cycle?
Yeah, this goes back again. I keep on going back to evolution. Now, when it comes to evolution and evolution of the species, positivity has no value whatsoever. Okay. Negativity has a massive value because as far as we're concerned, survival is key. So only 15,000 years ago, we were being hunted and hunting for our food. Time and technology has advanced so quickly, but Human evolution hasn't. We're still in that mindset. So we are default negative regardless. So we all come from a default negative blueprint. Now, everything we do, as soon as you start looking, everything we're always looking for what could go wrong. Everything we do, and as soon as you do that, everyone knows that as soon as you think something negative, it's contagious. Before you know it, you've got so many negative thoughts about one thing. Yeah, it's like it's so contagious. It's like the negativity just flows and flows and flows. But when you think about something positive, it's really hard to keep that momentum flowing with the positivity. So for us, I think that we're caught, and like I said, I've said this before, that earlier, that we are on a reverse cycle of yesterday, always looking for what could go wrong. Now, the thing is with mental health, a lot of people, they talk about mental health. I see it on Instagram time and time again. You know, there's people that are suffering with mental health issues, not just guys from the military. You know, PTSD is not owned by the military. PTSD is from every man, woman, child, every genre. So basically, if you're so wrapped up in the problem, you're never going to get out of it. And that's why I talk also about not forget about mental health is one thing, but start moving into mental wealth. How are you going to invest in yourself to put a ladder down into that bottomless pit and start climbing out rung by rung, one rung at a time? And that's why I think people have got to get away from the problem, get away from the issue, appreciate it, become aware of what happened, but start making a positive plan defined by a goal that is going to take you out from that bottomless pit and put you into a more positive mindset. A lot of people, I see it on Instagram, you know, people talk about, oh, this happened to me. And every year, it's 5 years, it's the 60th anniversary. Get away from it. Stop doing it. You're not doing yourself any favors. You know, you need to be able to have a more positive sort of mindset. And the only way you can do that is by making a plan to actually pull yourself out of that darkness.
It's sort of similar to a quote I read by Jack Canfield before. He talks about the idea of becoming a reverse paranoid. So if you're always paranoid about things, that is just going to attract negativity and problems. But if you're reverse paranoid and you assume, you know, the best in everything, then it's more likely that the best in everything is actually going to happen to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like we are, you know, like I keep saying, we live in a repeat pattern of yesterday. And people say, you know, it's like my girlfriend, she probably killed me for saying this, but she's like, oh, you know, I hate the way I am at the moment, you know, because we've moved, there's lots going on in the business, moved house, and we've both not been exercising as much as possible. And I'm like, oh, I hate the way everything is at the moment, you know, I just don't feel healthy. And I said, well, if you want your yesterday to be good, to be better, make today your next yesterday. It's what you do today. Don't sit in the problem. It's what you do today that will change your tomorrow and change your yesterday.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's a sound bite for the podcast if I've ever heard one. And so I just wanted to build on this idea of mentality while we're on there. And I think a great way to do that would be through a bit of visualization. And given that, of course, most people would know you from your work on SAS, Who Dares Wins. One of the things that people get a glimpse into, and I want to then talk about the mentality that is used behind this. But just for a bit of visualization, early on in your career and selection process, you had to endure interrogation phases. So before I ask you about the mental capacity it takes to get through something like that, could you detail what that selection, you know, what that process is like and what it consists of, just what is put on you in those positions?
Yeah, well, basically, first of all, I mean, this is the last part of your selection process. So once you get to the end, you know, this is the final test. So you've already come down a very arduous, very tough road already, end of a 6-month cycle. But that is the start of that is, you know, you're on a survival exercise. You know, you hardly eat, you do nothing. You have no nourishment whatsoever. And then you put into a sort of escape and evasion period of the course, which is about over 10 days. You're stripped totally of everything you've got. You to World War One fatigues, which is sort of like hairy blankets, which they turn into clothes. like the old World War One trench coat, and you're sent on the run, and you've got to evade capture for approximately 10 days, and you've been hunted by hunter force, dogs, helicopters, the whole lot. You have to sleep in the day, move at night, to use the stars as navigation to get from point A to B, and along the way you have to meet an agent, which, as long as you make the agent rendezvous, you then get the next information for the next coordinates for the next rendezvous. You don't sleep during the day. You're so on edge. You're moving from point to point, and it's horrendous. You have no sleep 10 days. Finally, you get there's an intentional capture, and you go into about 36. Well, not about, it is 36 hours, because I know every second of interrogation, and that is basically where you're put into a room. You go through periods of interrogation. Other times you're in a room where the floor is just hard, like shale rocks, and you have to kneel on it for the duration while there's white noise just as loud as anything blasting into your ears. And then you're taken away. It's an absolute pleasure when you're taken away, actually, to be interrogated. But then you get into interrogation and you wish you were back with the white noise. So some, and at the end of the day, people think it's a bizarre thing to do, but you're being prepared for war and being prepared to be captured. So, it's absolute massive amount of value. And this goes on for 36 hours. I mean, I can remember going into that, and when you get into your first couple of seconds, it's horrendous, absolutely horrendous, thinking I've got to do 36 hours of this. And it's, it's hideous. You just can't see you're getting up that mountain. And this is sort of analogy for things like this when times get really tough. And what I had to do at that point is you have to, although you have these goals, when times get tough, you have to pull everything back and focus on 1 meter squared. You have to break everything down into the second and just get through that second, a second upon a second. Because if you look at the bigger picture at that point, you're more likely to fail. And that's what you had to do in those. It had to be broken down second by second by second. I counted every end of that 36 hours, and it was hideous.
I can't begin to imagine what that is like, because even when I watch the show, and only that is, that's just I imagine a dampened down version of what you went through. But even when I watch the show, I think, the physical things, I think everyone can push themselves physically, but I think the hardest battle has to be that part of the show where it is that mental battle. And like you said, when you've got white noise blasting you, you're in really stressful positions. I can't imagine what it takes mentally to get through it. I mean, what are the thoughts in your head, and what are you saying to yourself?
Just 1 second more, and you have to forget the journey. You have to visualize the end. What's the outcome? What's my purpose? What's my outcome? How does that look? You focus on the outcome. The outcome for me was passing that selection, especially as it was my second one. Your purpose has to overwhelm your circumstance. Otherwise, you're overwhelmed by your circumstance. So as long as your purpose drives you and makes your circumstance belittled by your purpose, you're on the right track. But if your circumstance overwhelms your purpose, you'll never find a way out. Or you'll throw in the towel, you'll wrap, you'll not achieve your aim. So I'll say it again, your purpose has to overwhelm your circumstance.
I mean, one thing, final thing I wanted to get, because before I get into the three wrap-up questions, the one thing I wanted to ask was something that really surprised me. During the early stages of your career, you talked about you had to get taught the very basic things and how to do them properly, and that includes shaving, ironing, polishing your boots, things that people would assume they just know how to do, but you were taught a specific way to do them properly, gone back to basics. And the idea you used was that sloppiness becomes habitual. That was the quote you used. And is this still a way you think, is that something you've taken from that time in your life? And is that something you still practice today?
Yeah, 100%. That's something I've always done. And I think, I grew up in a family, my dad's got OCD anyway. So, but I see that as a kind of benefit. I inherited that, so I see that as a quality. But, I just feel that every little minor detail, the more you concentrate on the detail, the more you are ready to battle anything. It makes you battle ready for everything. Everything we want to do, we want to shortcut and not do it the right way. We don't want to send the extra email. We don't want to do the dishes at night. But once you start to do everything and do it with such attention to detail, it makes the bigger picture has so much more clarity. So yeah, I am, people would probably say I've got OCD or whatever, but yeah, I have, and it's a quality. It's a quality in so much as I make sure everything is squared away day by day to make my next day the best it can be.
Yeah, it's that idea of order. It brings me back to a quote I read before. It's like, before you try and change the world, make your bed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That is it. And there was a famous admiral that said that, in the States. And that was the thing, get up in the morning, make your bed. It's dead simple. Fall into process, because if you rely on emotion, you just end up in a world of hurt. So that is the process. Come in, because as soon as you walk back in, the last thing you want to walk back into is a mess. And that is your bed, just still the way you left it when you got out. And it's like, at the moment for me, it's driving me mental because I've just moved house. There's crap everywhere. And for me, when I see crap everywhere like that in my house, and the same with someone's car, etc., it just makes me feel that my life is out of control. And that creates a negative cycle in my head that I don't want to see. So, I always say a lot of the time as well, if someone comes for a job interview, you know what you're best in. Instead of sitting them in front of you and asking them to bullshit to you for half an hour, go outside and have a look at their car. Whether it's a new car or an old car, have a look. Is it shiny? And is it full of shit inside? Because if it's full of shit inside, then their head's full of shit as well.
So yeah, as we start to wrap this up now, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that we ask every guest that comes on the show. And the first one being, what are the societal norms or societal rules that you love to break?
Everything. And but the thing is, I wouldn't say everything. I question everything. If there's a rule put in place, question it. Understand the purpose of that rule. Does it suit your purpose? And if it doesn't, don't be afraid to break it.
Love it. So obviously you are now a very successful author yourself. The book Breakpoint, I will link in the show notes below, so anyone who hasn't ordered it yet can do so. So obviously that book is impacting other people's lives, but are there any books that you have read in your life that have had an impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one book that was a turning point for me that I read in 2014 was Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. Absolutely amazing. It made me understand how we work as humans, how, when I talk about observing your emotions as opposed to becoming a victim of them, that all comes from that book. And some people might read it and it might not resonate, but for me, everything clicked into place as soon as I read that book. All the questions that I was asking myself personally that were causing me confusion got answered in that book. So Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, absolutely, for me, that is the real Bible.
The final question I have for you, a lot has gone on in your life up until this point, but if you can recount, all the experiences and lessons you've learned in your life and put those into one short but impactful message that you would share with everyone in the world if you could, what would your message be?
My message would be that you must go beyond breakpoint every day and understand where your breakpoint is. And when the inclination is to turn back, strive forward and push through, because the obstacle is the way.
Amazing. Ollie, where can our listeners find you on social media?
Ollie Ollerton. I'm across Instagram as Ollie Ollerton, on Twitter, Ollie Ollerton. Company's called Breakpoint. That's across all platforms as well. So, yeah, you can find me. You'll be hard to miss me.